Everyone's missing the mark on the Pelicans, and to see why, you've got to go back to the 2021-2022 season because people are wrong about this team without Zion, and I'll tell you why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Thursday, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some ESPN ratings here because they have a predicted record for the Pelicans of 26-56. That is very wrong. They might not make the playoffs, but that number is very wrong, and I'll explain why in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control over your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget, you can watch Locked On Pelicans on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every single weekday at 10:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Same place you watch your Pelicans play. So let's get into this one. ESPN with their summer forecast series with their experts. I kind of railed against this yesterday with what they talked about with Zion wanting out and all of that. I don't need to rip on ESPN today. I've already done that. And if you want to kind of pile on there, jump into the comments in yesterday's show here. But again, national media does not know things about this team. They have a projected record for the Pelicans of 26-56 here, and that projects them to be second worst in the Western Conference. Look, I'm not saying this is a playoff team, but 26 wins, second worst in the West is silly to me here. You know, they're basically saying, can Zion Williamson stay healthy, right? And you know what? It's a valid question. They're probably looking at this and going, oh, Zion only played 30 games last year and the Pelicans won 21 games. So 26 wins seems about right. But here's the thing. Well, there's two things with it. The big thing is, though, in other years, when Zion has missed tons of time, the Pelicans actually have done okay. You know, last year was a different story, and I'll explain why in a few minutes here. Go back to 2022-2023. The team went 42-40. Zion only played 29 games. Go back the year before that. That was the year Zion missed the whole season. Zion played 0 games, whole season, and the team won 36 games. That's 10 more wins than what they're projecting for this team right now. That team had the 19th ranked offense and the 20th ranked defense that year. They were not good, right? They made the playoffs through the play-in tournament. Again, not saying that this is a playoff team without Zion, but in a year where they literally had not one contribution from Zion Williamson, they won 10 more games than what ESPN is predicting. And before you go and say, well, that team was more talented, absolutely not. They were not at all more talented than this current Pelicans team. Like, that is not true in the slightest here, because when you look at them and look at how they played, that team was pretty bad, in my opinion. Trey Murphy averaged 14 minutes per game on that team. Brandon Ingram only played 55 games. Devontae Graham started 63 games. Garrett Temple played over 18 minutes per game. Jackson Hayes played 70 games that year, averaging over 20 minutes per night. CJ McCollum was added mid-season and only played in 26 games. I would not call that team good, right? I would not call that team good in the slightest. Devontae Graham was third in minutes on that Pelicans team. Was Devontae Graham any good? No. Jackson Hayes was 5th. Despite being traded away, Josh Hart was 6th in minutes per game. CJ McCollum, was added midseason, but he only played in 26 games. I would not call that a great roster, and still 36 and 46. ESPN is saying this current team, even with a Zion Williamson injury, is 10 games worse than that one. 10 games worse. This team might not make the playoffs. I'm not saying that they're going to here, but I don't see them being second worst in the Western Conference. And maybe ESPN is kind of basing it off of last season, and they are. But if you're doing that, it goes to something that I said a lot of yesterday. That's lazy analysis. Not even analysis, right? Literally everybody was injured last year. Everybody was injured. Let's pull up the per game, the games played numbers. Eve Macy was the most at 73. Who do you think played the next most games for the Pelicans? I'm going to pause for dramatic effect. It was Jeremiah Robinson Earl. CJ McCollum at 56 games was played the third most games, tied with Jose Alvarado and Jordan Hawkins. JRE played 66 games, by the way. Think about that for a moment here. Not one player played over 2,000 minutes for the team last year. That's how far you're getting into the injuries here, right? We can run down this. DeJounte Murray played 31 games. Zion played 30. That's 61 games combined. When you throw in the 20 that Herb Jones played, only 20 games. That's not even a full 82 games combined between 3 players. You look at it for someone like Trey Murphy, 53 games, right? This team was massively injured. Brandon Ingram was traded in February. He played 18 games for this team. They just dealt with tons and tons and tons of injuries to basically every single person. So unless you think everyone is going to get injured again, and look, it's the Pelicans, that's maybe a valid thing to think, but if you don't think that they're going to have that degree of insane injury bad luck, and again, they kind of do every year, so I get it, but ESPN's not saying that. You would have said that, right? You would have just said this team is never healthy, and it wouldn't have just been one line basically about Zion Williamson. To kind of base your projections this year on last season, that's not correct, because there's more data, there's more evidence, there's a larger sample size that says even without Zion, this team usually shows something. Are they a lock to be in the playoffs? No. Are they a play-in tournament team even without Zion? Usually that's kind of where they end up. 26 projected wins, that seems too low. If you had said 36, I buy that. That puts them in that kind of summer forecast range here of the Sacramento Kings, the Phoenix Suns, the Portland Trailblazers. They have Portland at 39 wins, Sacramento at 37, Phoenix at 30, and then New Orleans at 26 and 56, only ahead of the Utah Jazz, who have 19 wins in their projections here. When you look at some of the teams above them, particularly the Blazers, which I want to look at coming up next, I don't know what they're doing here in ESPN. Let's break down those teams ahead of them, the Blazers, the Kings, the Suns, because all of those teams I don't think are going to be significantly better. Maybe they're better, but not significantly better than the Pelicans. Let's talk about that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Monarch Money. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or what's even in those accounts. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. And so that's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface. It's on your laptop or on your phone for when you're on the go. Monarch is built for people with busy lives. If you're putting off organizing your finances, Monarch's for you. It's going to do all the heavy lifting. I linked all of my accounts in minutes. I could see clear data visuals on where the money was going, how much I'm saving. It was categorizing spending, so I know if I need to cut back in certain areas, like on shoes, truthfully. I feel in control of my money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. So don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com or in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. I've closed the Locked On Pelicans fan survey, but Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcasts even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about our advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey is going to be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. You can buy shoes like I would. Again, that's lockedonpodcast.com/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes. We appreciate y'all helping us out. For your second listen, Spencer Rattler, QB1. What does Ross Jackson think about it? Go listen to Locked On Saints for his take. He's giving you the inside scoop on everything black and gold. Locked On Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make them your second listen today. So let's get into, we're still going to keep talking about the ESPN summer forecast. We're going to talk about it with the award stuff in the next segment too. I think the Pelicans are too low. Again, I'm not saying this Pelicans team is a lock for the playoffs or anything like that. They could easily miss the postseason. I don't think they are 4 games worse than the Phoenix Suns, 11 games worse than Sacramento Kings, and certainly not 13 games worse than the Portland Trailblazers. There's a line in this that I put on Twitter that I think, like, some of this I don't think is actually people writing this stuff truthfully. Like, I don't want to come in and accuse people of AI and things, but something just seems so lazy about this to me, right? I'll drop that little piece here in a minute here when it kind of looks at some of this stuff here. Let's get into some of these teams that are ahead of the Pelicans and be like, no, they're not that much better than New Orleans, in my opinion. And I want to start with the Portland Trailblazers, 39 wins. So you're projecting them to be right about 500. And this is a team last year that, seemingly came on strong in the second half of the season, but did they really? They won they were 36-46 last year, and everyone's expecting them to kind of take a big step forward, after adding someone like Drew Holiday, getting rid of DeAndre Ayton, buying him out, right? Like, I'm not convinced that team is going to be better. Everyone, I think, is very much overrating the Portland Trailblazers based on how they played post All-Star break. They came on kind of strong at the end, except they also had 2 5-game losing streaks. Sorry, 1 5-game losing streak, 1 4-game losing streak in the second half of the season when they were supposedly coming on strong. They were 13-14 after the All-Star break. I'm going to tell you this. The worst thing you can do is read too much into March and April basketball when things are just real screwy out there. There's a lot of noise as teams like the Pelicans, among others, were straight up tanking after the All-Star break. There were a lot of teams straight up tanking after the All-Star break. And if you beat up on those bad teams, it doesn't actually make you a good team, in my opinion. It's the type of thing that is basically just fool's gold. 13-14 isn't a great record post All-Star break. Let's go through this for a second, because when you break it down to who they beat and who they lost to, there is like nothing about this that makes you feel good about this team whatsoever, if you're the Portland Trailblazers. Here are their wins after the All-Star break, okay? They beat Utah. They beat Toronto twice. They beat the Wizards twice. They beat the Spurs after Victor Wembanyama was shut down. They beat Atlanta, who's meh. They beat Memphis, fine, whatever, but still, is that like that great of a win? Not really. Also, Ja Morant didn't play in that game. You saw them beat Philly, who was bad, Brooklyn, who was bad, Charlotte, who was bad, and hey, they beat Denver, except Jokic didn't play. They're 2 good wins in those 13 that they had were against teams that didn't have their best players playing. Here's their losses. Sacramento, OKC, New York, Boston, Cleveland, Boston again, Golden State, the Lakers, Detroit, Utah, Chicago, Cleveland, and the Knicks again. They lost to literally every good team that they played. That's the team that's going to take a leap going forward. Look, I love Drew Holiday. We love Drew Holiday here. That's not the type of player that's going to elevate you that many wins at this point in his career, right? They signed Damian Lillard back in. Cool. Except he's not playing this year. I think Portland is fool's gold. Like, I think I don't even know what their win total is per FanDuel. I'm not even going to look. I would take the under. You can tell me whatever it is, and I'm going to take that under. I don't think that team's going to be very good next year. Donovan Klingen's going to start for him. Okay, could be good. Hansen Yang is going to start for him. Maybe. Like, there's too much unknown there. Is Scoot Henderson actually going to take that step forward that, seemingly has been coming for a while? I have no idea. I don't think they're going to be good. To give them 39 wins and say that team is 13 games better than New Orleans is really, really silly to me based on them having the 17th best record post All-Star break. Like, get out of here with that. Look, the other teams that are ahead of them here, I don't buy any of this necessarily. Like, they could be, but I don't think it's a lock. Phoenix at 30-52, 4 games better than New Orleans. Like, they have Devin Booker and a bunch of bigs. Like, what is that team right now that is going through such a massive change, right? Like, they didn't get much in return for Kevin Durant. Cool. They added Kaman Malawach in the draft that is going to be a good player eventually, but kind of struggled in Summer League, which doesn't look great. Again, that's not the be all end all of it, right? The Sacramento Kings have Zach LaVine, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, and now Dennis Schroeder. Like, yeah, 37 wins, somewhere in that range, makes sense for them. But is that truthfully 21 wins better than the Pelicans with Zion Williamson, Jordan Poole, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy? I don't think it is, right? Again, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan have done what exactly, in their, careers here to elevate their teams. I did a whole show on being like, don't trade for Sabonis, at least for Zion, because that's not the type of guy that I'm interested in because I don't think he impacts winning at a high level. You can get into some of these Eastern Conference teams that they have projected to be like better than the New Orleans Pelicans. And I'm like, I don't quite see it here. The Toronto Raptors at 33-49, which this is what makes me think there's some AI written when it comes to all of this, right? Here's their line about the Toronto Raptors, which maybe just means this is pointless to look at in the first place. Quote, first, it's the team that has the potential to rise into the playing group, the Raptors. Toronto didn't trade Brandon Ingram last spring and instead gave him a 9-figure extension. Teams sitting in the luxury tax don't expect to be projected at the bottom of the standings. If Toronto is eliminated from postseason contention, it'll be a major disappointment. I'm sorry, what? The Raptors didn't trade Brandon Ingram and instead gave him a 9-figure extension? They traded for Brandon Ingram in February. Is February considered spring? Maybe it is, but like that's an AI thing that like doesn't get the trade deadline and stuff because I've seen that before, right? Like they're not going to be that much better than New Orleans. We kind of seen what Brandon Ingram's ceiling can be. It can take you far enough, but there's a limit there for sure. Right? Again, what are they doing that makes you believe in the Toronto Raptors? Now, 33 is, only 7 more wins than New Orleans, but it's still more. The Chicago Bulls are the definition of mediocrity. 36-46 is about right, but when you look at that team, you're going to be like, that's significantly better than the Pelicans? No, not at all. That's a team that does need to blow it up because they don't have a top-end talent guy like a Zion Williamson. I don't get what's going on here. One of the funniest things did come from this, by the way, particularly with the Phoenix Suns, where Matt Ishbia put out a comment when someone was like, oh, the Suns projected to be this. And he's like, well, the experts, this was incredible. He basically said, well, the experts thought we were going to be title contenders last season and we weren't. So you shouldn't listen to them. We'll be better this year. And like, your whole argument to not listen to the experts is they said you were supposed to be good last year and you weren't. So like, don't listen to those guys is a bizarre statement. Truthfully, one of the funnier things I think I've read on Twitter in a while from an NBA owner here. Oh, they thought we were going to be good, but we weren't. So don't listen to them when they're saying we're going to be bad this year. That is some galaxy brain level stuff that really does make me laugh. The Bulls, by the way, were 17-10 post All-Star break. You're going to put them where you are because, again, you're overvaluing records after the All-Star break when you shouldn't do that. Beware of of teams looking really good post All-Star break. You can look at some of these teams that lost in the first round of the playoffs. They were good post All-Star break. The Lakers were 18-2. Post All-Star break, they lost in the first round, right? Milwaukee was 19-10, lost in the first round. They're a little bit of an outlier because of the injury. Houston Rockets, 18-19, lost in the first round. Clippers, 19-19, lost in the first round. Some of the teams, Oklahoma City was 24-4 post All-Star break. Like, they won the finals, so that's good. But some of these teams that go on runs are beating up on bad teams. And some of them aren't even that good. Toronto was also 13-14, tied with Portland for the 17th best record. Sacramento Kings, right? 12-15. If you can't beat up on bad teams post All-Star break, you're probably not that good. Kind of as simple as that. Pelicans being healthy, different story though. So coming up next, couple more things from the summer forecast, and we are going to leave this thing behind unless they put out another article, in which case we'll jump on it. But I want to look at the lack of award love for the Pelicans. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. Don't forget, you can also watch the Locked On Pelicans podcast on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network every day. 10:30 a.m. every weekday at 10:30 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. We've got a whole Locked On block of Locked On Saints, Locked On Pelicans, Locked On LSU, and Locked On SEC in the morning there from 10 to noon, the same place you watch your Pelicans play. For your second listen, it's actually going to be at TV. It's another big moment for Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff. It's a weekly preview show every Thursday that only Locked On can do, with Locked On Big 12 lead alongside AP Coach of the Year, two-time AP Coach of the Year, Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. It's going to be every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. So we're talking about the ESPN summer forecast here, just really not being kind to the Pelicans. Guess what? There's no talk of them in any of the awards here. And look, to be expected. I wouldn't throw anyone from this Pelicans team in MVP. As much as I like Jeremiah Fears, as you get a win Rookie of the Year, it's going to go to Cooper Flagg. I completely agree with that. When you look at Sixth Man of the Year, there's no one that screams out at you. Most improved is likely not going to be Trey Murphy because he already averages too many points. Coach of the Year, it's not going to be anyone here. I wouldn't put anyone in for Clutch Player of the Year either. What is noticeable to me is a lack of Herb Jones on Defensive Player of the Year. Again, everyone is just looking at last season for New Orleans and completely ignoring everything else and just how much of last year was truthfully just bad because of injuries. And not because the team was actually trash. You look at this, who will win Defensive Player of the Year? I don't disagree with most of the names on here, right? Victor Wembanyama being number one, Evan Mobley, Chet Holmgren, Giannis, Rudy Gobert. Sure, buy all those names here. Notice they're all basically centers or big men because that's kind of what wins this award for the most part. But you should throw someone like Herb Jones in. 2 years ago, Herb Jones basically was the first non-big on Defensive Player of the Year voting. He is that good of a defender, and he was just injured all of last year, only played 20 games, and then the team basically just shut everyone down and tanked, right? Look, Herb Jones, you don't want to forget about Herb Jones. That's how Herb Jones blocks your three-point shot if you forget how good he is. When literally every player talks about how he is the toughest defender out there. Luka Doncic, he shut him down. Luka has talked about how tough it is to play against Herb Jones. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, both shut down by Herb Jones. The list goes on and on and on. He makes Kevin Durant's life difficult, and Kevin Durant is one of the most gifted offensive players we've literally ever seen in the league. people should not sleep on Herb Jones. Also, look, we've got to eventually change Defensive Player of the Year if it's basically a perimeter guy really is only like a fluke once every couple of years wins one. Not a fluke, but you get the point that I'm making here. The fact that no one voted for Herb Jones, no one in national media is paying attention to this team. I'm not convinced people in this survey pay attention to the league if the whole line is, hey, Brandon Ingram wasn't traded by the Raptors. Like, they weren't going to trade him. They traded for him and immediately gave him an extension. So it's not like they were going to trade him this off season. It's just the weirdest thing that makes me wonder, like, they're clearly not looking at a lot of things here, right? Like, I don't want to use that as a moment to be like, come to Locked On and look at how awesome Locked On is, right? But makes you value kind of the local coverage like this in a way that, maybe you're not going to get on, you're just straight up not going to get on the national scale. It's that whole thing was super weird to me, seeing that and looking at this whole survey. They don't know what's going on with the team. This is why you come to me or others for your Pelicans coverage, because it's the boots on the ground people covering the things that you want to know about, that you care about. And we're going to touch on all of them here. And next week, we're going to look at the Locked On Pelicans fan survey. I've got a couple of shows. The whole week's going to kind of be based around that. We're going to start with Trey Murphy on Monday. I'm really excited for that. One more show for this week of Locked On Pelicans. Maybe get into some trade talk and a couple of other things too. I'm excited for it. I hope you're excited for next week, breaking down the fan survey as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be back with y'all tomorrow.